OITC 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hodder Show.
What is up, everybody? We are on audio here today on episode 387 of The Hodder Show. I hope you guys doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on the first episode of 2024. Happy New Year. I hope you had a wonderful and safe holiday season and New Year's Eve. I know I did. It was quiet, but lovely. Got to spend some time with my wife. First time we've actually both been off for New Year's in a while. So it was a lot of fun. And we are going to have a wonderful new year here on The Hodder Show. Some really cool milestones coming up here. Coming up pretty damn soon, actually. But we are starting off the new year with a fantastic interview with my buddy, Gerrod Harris, who is the host of Beats by Jer podcast, is also an interviewer and writer for The Spill magazine. And of course, you might know him as the drummer for One in the Chamber, one of the best rock bands to come out of Ontario, Canada. And we have a really wonderful chat ranging his whole career, talking about the podcast, talking about his work with Spill magazine, talking about his work with One in the Chamber, as well as some fun tangents about music, podcasting, and life in general even. It was a really fun chat and a really great way to start off the new year. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. Before we jump into it, I want to thank everybody for their support on the last couple episodes of the show. Of course, the Christmas edition of Ask Hodder Anything, the retrospective, which is always a blast. And I actually had a couple of announcements on that. And if you missed them, go back and listen, because there's some cool stuff coming here at the, I'm not going to share the Hodder Show camp just specifically, but the TJ Hodder camp. Let's just say that. But we will talk more about that another time, because now, to start off 2024 with a bang, we're going to jump into my interview with Gerrod Harris from One in the Chamber, Beats by Jer, and The Spill magazine. Let's get into it. All right, guys, just starting off the new year with a killer interview here with my man, Gerrod Harris, drummer for One in the Chamber, writer, interviewer for The Spill magazine, and host of the phenomenal Beats by Jer podcast. Gerrod, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey, man. How's it going?
Oh, I am doing fantastic, man. Happy to be chatting with you here. We've been wanting to link up for a little while because there's so much that we have to talk about. Obviously, your work in the band, the stuff you do with The Spill, and then obviously the podcast. Ton of ground to cover, dude. So just jumping in head first here, let's start talking about the podcast. Obviously, as you know, podcasting is near and dear to my heart. And you actually reached out to me, gosh, I want to say it was like a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe now, about podcasting.
Something like that.
Yeah. And
summer
it was
2022-ish, maybe?
Was it really that? Okay, I guess it was. Wow, I can't believe it was that long ago. But you had this idea for a killer podcast, and I got really excited when you told me about it. Walk people through what the podcast is all about and what you do with it.
So Beats by Jer is kind of like, it started as my own creative endeavor to basically look at music and look at society and kind of look at the significance of music and its role that it has on people, on culture, and, you know, just have a chance to talk about music. And it seemed like a logical step forward just because I've spent so many years writing about music for, you know, The Spill magazine. And before that was Canadian Beats and the Heavy Press. So like I've been reviewing music for so long that this just seemed like the next step forward. And yeah, no, I called you up because A, your podcast is awesome, but B, I didn't know how to start. And I didn't know if I actually wanted to start. It was just kind of this thing that had been kicking around inside my head for, I don't know how long at that point. And, you know, it's like everyone and their mom seems to have a podcast these days. Do I actually have an idea for one? Do I actually have something that's interesting or of value? Or is it just something that like I myself was getting excited about? But, you know, even beyond that, it was like, how do you make a podcast? Like how much work goes into this? And our conversation was just so invaluable. Like the excitement you had for me with this idea was so incredibly contagious. And like, it took me almost a year to actually start the podcast from that conversation, but it was just it was exactly what I needed to start this exercise in creativity.
When I think what got me so excited about it, aside from the fact that, having had a couple conversations with you, I was like, okay, this guy clearly, he has a passion for this. It's very apparent within speaking with you. You obviously have great knowledge, obviously with your background doing the writing and interviewing that you do. There's that side of it. But then also when you spoke about the idea of you looking into and really from I guess like a more of a, like a statistical standpoint, breaking down these records and what they mean to the world and everything, like that got me really excited because I've never really dove into that side of things just because I'm not as, I guess, fluent on that side of the industry. So like that got me really excited to be like, I would love to hear your point of view on some of these records and these bands from that.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's been a lot of fun. And like, I just, I read a lot of books that are kind of in tone with that. And it's really just interesting to me to see how something that is someone's passion, someone's art can be a reflection of society, or vice versa, can reflect shifts in culture and the changing of times.
Yeah. And I think that some of the stuff that you have covered has been really fun to kind of listen to you really break that down. Cause I mean, like for me, I can talk about, I do these things once in a blue moon that I'll, called the albums that made me, which I'll like talk about what a specific record means to me. And I might talk a little tiny bit about like, oh yes, this record, had a platinum single, or this record was this, or, but I more focus on what it means to me. So to hear you kind of break down the cultural significance of some of these records and bands is really just exciting and fun. And I think that's what really got me so excited about it. Cause, like you had said, everyone and their grandma has a podcast. Hi. So it's like, and I've seen, and I listen, I hope this doesn't come off wrong here, folks, but like for me, I've seen so many people start podcasts in the last almost 8 years now. And, they'll do like 2 or 3 episodes and then just not do it ever again. So I'm like, man, I don't want to see that. I want everyone to have a podcast. I think everyone has a voice and has something to say. So when I see now that you're at 15 episodes in, I think at this point, like
something like that. Yeah.
That's super exciting. Cause that's, that's kind of one of the milestones, to be honest, dude, is that 15 to like 50 is like, for whatever reason, like you get to that first 15, it's like, cool. Now you're going to get to 50. Once you get to 50, it's all smooth sailing from there. It's like, that seems to be right around the time when people drop off in that first 15. So just keep,
you know what? Like you did warn me about that. And
yeah,
your passion for podcasting is so apparent because you explicitly were like, I see so many people start and it's so disheartening when they stop.
Yeah.
And it's so clear that you love the format so much. And like, it's apparent in your work, but it's just apparent talking to you about podcasts. And you're right. Like it's such a cool format that allows for, it's not a TV show. It's not a movie where you have to watch the last 15 to get it. You could tune into someone's episode that excites you for the subject of that episode. And it's such a cool medium like that. I will admit that it's gotten it was a lot of work, and you did warn me about that. And I started off super ambitious, like once a week, and I am dialing it back to twice a month now because just between this and work and other things, I don't want the podcast to suffer. I want to be able to write and do research and record them in a way that meets the expectations I have. But yeah, I hit episode 15. It's been a ton of fun, and it's been a great experience.
And I think that's a really great approach to have. And trust me, that's something that took me a long time to get to the point where I'm like, okay, now like, yes, the Harder Show is weekly, quote unquote. There are some, I'm not as cutthroat about that anymore. If it's like, okay, if I have an episode this week, it's going to be rushed. It's not going to feel right to me. Maybe I'm not in the right headspace for it for whatever reason. Maybe I'm too busy. So instead of rushing something and it not be up to the quality I want, at least for myself and my listeners, I'd rather just not have something. So I think taking a step back isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's lots of people that I wish would have taken that route and just maybe taken a step back than just quitting altogether. And for your format, especially with how much work you put into the research and everything, like, I think that's more than fair to do.
Oh, thank you. If anyone complains, I'm gonna tell them to take it up with you.
Please do send them my way. I say, listen. If I could go back in some of the other podcasts I've been involved with, I would have just done the bi-weekly thing, even monthly. Like it's just having content that you can use to express yourself, regardless of how often you do it, is awesome. And if you're enjoying it and you're having fun, that is the main thing that I say to everybody. Like, just have fun, man. That's why we all got into whatever creativity that we do. It's because it was fun. Let's stick with that.
Yeah,
So
I think that's kind of what started this whole idea was, like being a writer for the Spill magazine, like some sort of anniversary of a record would come up and I'd be like, oh, I would love to like talk about that. But that's just not really, like, I've done a couple articles like that, but it's just not really the format that we really do. And I think that's kind of what started this idea just in the back of my head was like, you could just start a podcast and talk about the records you want to talk about and why they're important. You know what I mean? Like, it sounded like a fun idea, and it sounded like you were kind of saying, like, there were just ideas there, and this has just given me a way to find that that point of expressing them.
It's almost like you found another way to express your voice, which is really cool. Definitely. So one thing I wanted to ask about now that you're, 15 episodes in or so, obviously, we're going to talk about the interview that you did. But I wanted to ask, just having listened to you talk about this for a little bit, do you have a episode at this point that you focused on a specific record or a specific band that you really feel is like, okay, this is my favorite episode, or this is what I feel is my best episode that I would want people to check out?
Oh, I don't know.
It's kind of like asking for your favorite kid, I guess, but
yeah, but you definitely have least favorite ones, right?
Well, sure. Yeah, of course. I got lots of least favorite episodes of the Otter Show.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's so subjective as well, because like I put out a tribute episode to Robbie Robertson, and it's my shortest episode. It's 19 minutes. And as I was doing it, it felt more like biographical than critical. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is like the tone that I want, but I put it out, and like the first thing that a friend reaches out to me with about that episode was that it was his favorite episode. But it's still, to me, it's still like, I don't know if that's the tone that I want to pursue in future. If I had to pick a favorite, I really like the Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen, where I looked at the pair of albums from that the Chili Peppers released in 2022. 2022. That to me was supposed to be the first episode, but as like, I think I wrote that one back in like February or March of last year. But the podcast didn't launch until like July. And by the time July rolled around, I was like, maybe I should look at 2022 as a whole instead of just starting with a random pair of records that came out. So that it ended up being episode 3, but I recorded that episode on Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen like 5, 6, maybe more times, just to kind of like, that was like the episode that I like found, like I experimented with the software and I found the style of approaching it, and like rewrote it so many times to just learn how to structure, because it's not writing a thesis, it's not writing a review, but like finding that way to structure an episode. And how do you do that? And to me, like, that was kind of like what really made me go like, I think I can do this. Even though it was episode 3, it was the first one that was done. So that one kind of stands out, I think. that being said, I had a lot of fun looking at Chinese Democracy, just because that record is such a weird collection of huge hits and huge misses. And doing the research, it was like that story of that album, that ill-fated Guns N' Roses album, if you can call it Guns N' Roses at that point. It was just so, you couldn't believe just all of it, right? Like every detail that I was doing all these research and listening to other people being interviewed about this, making this episode, this album, it was like, you get to a certain point and you're like, of course Buckethead chose to record only in a chicken coop. You know what I mean? Like it was such an absurd thing that it was a lot of fun researching. I feel like I'm just going to keep listing episodes. I really liked the September 24th, 1991 episode. That one was really cool because like I have such a thing for 90s alternative music, whether it's hip hop or like alternative rock music. And that was a really fun one to put together and really make that connection between music as a marker for huge cultural change, and looking at September 24th, 91 as the day that the 90s truly began. And we see that flip, through A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory, Nirvana's Nevermind, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, seeing how that one day kind of signified the shift of where like all that counterculture, alternative rock and hip hop of the 80s kind of flipped into the mainstream and became the center of pop culture. That was a really cool episode, I think.
There's a lot that you can dive into with what you've done. And I mean, I think that Chinese Democracy episode, it's funny you brought that up because like that is such a fascinating episode and fascinating record. Like, just
thank you so much.
You gave a really quick, for anyone who's into just not even if you don't like the record or like Guns N' Roses, like just that record as a whole is so weird and so wild.
Yeah.
Like that was our generation when, like, we remember when that came out. Like,
yeah,
what was it? Like 2008 or something like that. It was like
something like that.
I remember.
I think I was in the ninth grade.
Yeah, I remember. Like, well, I guess that was the year before I was it. It was like the year I graduated, before I graduated high school or something. But like, it was like, I remember like everyone's like, "Oh, Guns N' Records, good lord, Guns N' Roses record just leaked," and I was like, "Huh? Like what?" Yeah. I remember thinking like, like that Welcome to the Jungle Band just released a new record. Like, it's then you hear it and you're like, oh, okay, like this is
you know what? I don't think I like what I enjoyed about that episode, because like I mostly focus on records that I like love, you know what I mean? And trying to find the significance beyond the fact that I love it and people love it. But with that one, it was like, I think I had seen Guns N' Roses. I think it was around the time that I saw them this year. Because like I love the band, I love Slash, and like I know what they sound like live. I'm really just there to see Slash. But like they played Chinese Democracy, and I was like, this song is actually like really good. So I wanted to go back and listen to the album, because I was like, you know what, maybe like it's been like 10 years since I listened to this. Maybe it's actually like better. Like it's just one of those things you have to sit with. Like an album like that cannot live up to the hype that they had built for themselves. And I listened to it, and no, most of it still doesn't live up to anything. But there are like a couple songs on there that I really enjoyed, and I was like, oh, this is like really cool. But it was just kind of a unique way of looking at an album and looking at why it's important for, I guess, the wrong reasons and things like that, but also important for the eventual reunion of the band, I would assume. Because like if that album like did incredibly well and was incredibly well received, I don't know if Slash and Duff would have been able to get back in the band, you know?
I think it's cool to look at, and it's a conversation everyone loves to have, right? Talking about those records that maybe weren't great, but are super important for whatever reason. Or maybe there's one or two cool songs on them. Like, just like off the top of my head, one record that I don't know how much of a Metallica fan you are.
I like Metallica quite a bit.
But I would love if I could just sit here and make a recommendation for an episode one day.
Okay.
Listen to me. I would love to hear you talk about Saint Anger
Oh
and do your
man.
thing about Saint Anger. I know it might be rough, but I would love to hear from a drummer's standpoint. Like,
I mean, that snare drum is just so infamous
it's
for
such
how
a.
terrible it is. I'm gonna keep this as a note though, because I see where you're going with it.
I think either that or Death Magnetic, because that's like, was there like return to form, so to speak.
It was there. Yeah. You know
Yeah.
what? It's so funny because I, oddly enough, wasn't all that crazy about Death Magnetic either.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't know
and
what it was.
I get why. It's like it was almost like they were trying a little too hard.
A
And
bit.
then,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Hardwired, it's like there's some songs on Hardwired that I'm like, dude,
loved Hardwired. To
same
me,
here,
that was
man.
the Metallica's return. Like,
Yeah.
I love that album. And looking back, like, there are a couple songs on it that you could cut and you could make it like a perfect single record. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of the feedback it got was because it was a double album, and like there are some songs that are not as essential as others. Like, believe me, for months I listened to that album and front to back I loved it, and I still do. But I think there are some songs on there that if you cut, that album would have been so incredibly well received and loved.
Yeah, I do
Like,
understand that.
Make it like a single record and just I love that album.
I mean, you look at the first 6 track, Hardwired, Atlas Rise, Now We're Dead, Moth into Flame, Dream No More, Halo on Fire. I could do it on Halo on Fire personally.
I could do without Halo on Fire.
Yeah,
but
I
like
could do
that
without
first
that and Confusing. But then
Yes,
otherwise,
yeah.
give me and
Without-
Am I Savage. But
Ooh, that
I'm
one's
not a fan.
tough. Ooh.
Not a fan.
Ooh, hang on, I'm pulling up the album.
I just happened to pull it up just because you got my brain going. But like, man, like when I heard obviously Hardwired, I was like, okay, cool. But then I heard like,
oh, I loved Hardwired. Like,
I
the
still
moment
think,
that song came out, I was
dude.
like, holy shit, Metallica is back.
I remember, and you know what made me love it was there was a local guy who I'm not going to name, who was kind of a let's just say he's a really nice guy. And he made this big long post about how it's garbage and, like it starts off with the I think he called it the worst, like, snare roll in the history of music or something like that. And like all this. And I was like, okay, if he hates it this much, it's got to be at least decent. And sure enough, I listened to it and I'm like, yeah, okay. But okay, so I have to ask just while we're on this topic before we move on, because there's tons more I want to talk to you about, but I knew it was going to divulge into this. Well, not
That's
divulge,
okay. That's
but
what we're
you know
here
what
for.
I mean?
Yeah.
What is
side steps are what we're here for.
Yes, I'm all about it, man. What is your opinion on Here Comes Revenge from that record?
Oh, that's a great one. Okay. I would not cut that one at all.
Okay, because I love
that one.
I actually, in all honesty, that is now my second favorite Metallica riff.
Ooh.
That yeah,
Ooh.
that down. I was like, bro, what the hell is this? And no one talks about it. And I'm like, what Rob does in the verse with Lars, like, come on, man.
No, I love that one.
I love that
one. That one and Spit Out the Bone are like essential. I would say on the last half.
Of course, that's
Spit
James,
Out the Bone is just so stupidly classic. It's just so good.
I think that one of the most interesting songs for me, though, was actually Moth into Flame, because I remember I heard it and I heard that chorus and I was like, this is exactly what I feel Metallica needed to do to still seem like, hey, we're not just like, you know how, like, I say this respectfully as I can, but sometimes a band will release a record that's like an older band and it'll be like, okay, this sounds like them trying to fit into this era of music.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, especially in the chorus, I guess it was just like the melody of the guitars and everything. But like, I was like, this just sounds like Metallica in 2016. Like, it's just super modern while still being classic.
That's a good way of putting that record. And I kind of talked about that on, it might have actually been the Chili Peppers Unlimited Love Return of the Dream Canteen episode. But the idea of a legacy band and how, like, we're at an era now where, like, because before in the 2000s, a classic rock band was almost certainly going to be a legacy band. But now there's this era where most bands that have been around long enough are a legacy band, but then there are just like a couple of them that are still going above and beyond. And I don't necessarily mean in quality, but like they're taking risks on their albums. They're doing things differently. They're doing new things. They're not just trying to sound like themselves or sound like other people, like themselves from the past, I mean. And that, you know, they're able to put on these like huge shows that are bigger than most legacy bands would be. And I, you know, like I use this point to kind of illustrate what the Chili Peppers were doing in 2022. But I believe it was the same episode, but I put Metallica in the same boat because, you know, they like Hardwired was such a, like, it's Metallica in 2016, like you said, right? And like their shows are huge, and the whole no repeats weekend tour that they did this year, what a fantastic idea. You know, they're in one of those, that stage of where they have every right to be a legacy band in the traditional sense. Like they've got the records, they've got the career, and they've certainly got the money that they could just stop doing records and they could just do the same tour for the next 20, 30 years. But like, they're clearly not. And it's so like inspiring to see artists that defy that despite having all means of falling into that trapping.
Definitely so, man. And I mean, unless of course you ask Dee Snider, then it's a terrible idea to do a no repeat weekend and it's a ripoff. But you know, that's
you know what, I did see his point, because like with the cost of tickets these days and like how much they were selling out both nights in like huge stadiums. So like I see his point, because you're going to get fans that like can only afford to go see one show, and like they're not going to hear like Enter Sandman or Master of Puppets that night, and they're going to be like, oh, you know. But like I get it, but at the same time, it was just such a cool idea to challenge the current like touring system that we have, especially like when you're a band that big and you can do 2 nights in one city. Why not, you know, like why not make them completely different sets?
Definitely. And I think it's a really cool idea. Like I personally wouldn't mind if some of my favorite bands did that. Like I'm a huge, like Alice in Chains is my favorite band, right? So like
cool.
From the standpoint of every time I've seen them, they've always pulled out at least 2 or 3 songs that I'm like, what? Like, no. I think it was like they played, I saw them at Casino Rama actually, which is
I was at that show.
No.
I was at that show. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember some idiot screaming super loud when they started playing Acid Bubble and no one reacted to it except for like 2 or 3 people?
Yes.
Literally, Jerry looked over. I remember like it was yesterday, bro. Jerry looks over at William and like gives him a head nod and just starts playing it. Like
I was not expecting that song at all.
And I was like, what? I was like literally screaming, and like everyone looked at me like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, it's Acid Bubble. Like, what?
Everyone around you is just like, yeah, but when are they going to play Man in the Box?
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, dude, that's what you want from bands. Because like one of my favorite bands is now going that legacy route after this year. And it's funny how you were bringing all that up, and it was just like triggering my brain to be like, I do understand why you go that route after a while. Because it's like, listen, you know, maybe it's a bit cynical to look at it this way, but it's like a lot of people aren't going to care about a new record. They just want to hear the same, you know, 10 or 15 songs every time they see us, right?
Well, I think it's that, but it's also so economical because like no one's making money off their records anymore, unless you're Taylor Swift or, you know, like unless you have a huge pop hit. But even then, like maybe you're making money off of that song, but like not the record, right?
Right.
And everyone's making their money through touring and merch. So like if you're in that position where you can just say like, what's the most fiscally responsible thing to do? It's hit the road for the 5th summer in a row without a new album, right? Which, I mean, it people have been doing that since before the touring industry was in this bubble that it's in right now. Like it's always kind of been that way, especially like you saw it like a lot, I think in the 2000s and maybe the 90s, but I was a kid then, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But like you saw it, and so it's not only the economic course of the industry currently, but like I think that's definitely an encouraging thing for artists that are like, okay, we can make a record and spend a ton of money making it, or we can make like 3 times that money we would have spent without it.
And I think that's why a lot of bands are going that route. Like, you know, like one of my favorite bands, Godsmack, they just released what is apparently their last record this year.
Oh yeah.
And,
I heard about that.
You know, from the standpoint of me, I'm like, you know what, cool, rock and roll, do whatever makes you happy. You know what I mean? But it's like, there's still that part of me that's like, man, like, look at like what like Metallica's doing. Like, look at what some of these other bands that have been around even longer. They're still trying to do cool things, you know, like you don't have to. I guess it was because of how it's like advertised. This is going to be our last record. And I'm like, but is it though? Is it in like 5 years, you're going to be like, you know, I really want to write a new record. Like
maybe
I don't know.
maybe the loophole is that they're going to do EPs. You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, and that's it. Even if you do the route that so many bands do now, where it's like they just kind of do singles, like I don't think there's anything wrong with that either nowadays. Like really, who like do 5 singles and then put them all on an EP and release that eventually? Like, you know, like you could always do that.
Yeah,
like,
something like that. I like the idea of it being packaged as an album.
Same
It's
here.
just, you know, like I've always been like, even as a kid, like all into just listening to an album for the album experience. And, you know, I'm still like that. So I, you know, when bands put out a single without an album, it's like one of those things that just kind of like in my mind, it almost gets forgotten about. And then it like shows up on a playlist or it shows up on shuffle. And you're like, oh yeah, that one time they put out one song in 2012 and didn't back it up with it, you know? Like I find that because we all have so many singles coming out all the time, if it's not collected somewhere, it almost gets lost in the shuffle.
Definitely so. And I mean, a really great example of that actually that I think is fun with the whole standalone single thing. Like I'm a huge, obviously I'm a lot of the time I'm a metal hard rock guy, you know, but one of my other favorite bands, Machine, had released a song in 2016 called "Is There Anybody Out There?" And it was this super out of left field song for them, but it ended up being their most successful single to date, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
I'm trying to find the information to back that up. But it was, non-album single. And it is a really cool, interesting song. Yes, it was. Okay, it was one of their top charting songs. And it's their most streamed song ever, most viewed on YouTube. Like it's this huge song, but a lot of people don't remember it. Like, because it was just this random song they dropped a year before they did a record, and then it wasn't on the record.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah, and then they
especially
did this
where it was
thing.
so successful. Like you think they would have just thrown it on there.
Like it wasn't on the Catharsis record, and I'm like, would it have fit on that record? That record was a kind of a weird collection of stuff anyway, so I think it would have. But like, I don't know. I'm sure there was a logistical reason as to not do that. But like, you'd think like, yo, this song. Like it was on the US main charts. Like it charted in like the top 40. I'm like, you'd think you'd, I don't know, throw it on there. But then they did it again with 2 other, Circle the Drain, a great song from them that wasn't on any records or anything. It wasn't even on they did an EP in 2020. It wasn't even on that. I was like, dude, what the hell's going on? Like, I don't know. It's just, it's cool to do that. But then like to your point, even me as a big fan of Machine Head, sometimes I forget about those songs.
Yeah.
And then I think, rediscover them. I'm like, this is a great song.
I don't know if it's because of like our age where we grew up with albums, but there definitely is like when something is collected, I think it's easier to remember an album than it is to remember a standalone song. And like, of course I understand how important singles are. Like it's a singles game right now, right? It's completely shifted. But I think there's something to be said about like an era of a band, and collecting that era onto an album, even an EP, or, you know, and if you just throw that sort of standalone single as like a bonus track onto an album, like I think it becomes something that's easier to remember. And, you know, when you're scrolling through Spotify, you're not like searching for it in the bottom singles thing. You can find it on an album.
And I think that's just my only complaint about that is like, I'll be like, oh man, I really want to show you this song. And I'm like, wait, where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
Yeah,
Damn it.
yeah.
I'm scrolling through looking for it.
Yeah, because the singles are all at the bottom, even though Spotify is like the reason that it is a singles game.
Mhm. But then they don't make it very accessible, do they? Interesting.
Yeah. You have to scroll for like a whole 5 seconds to find
Yeah.
it.
And that's
if you
5
think about it.
seconds that you might forget what you're looking for.
There you go.
Like I'll be scrolling through it. I'm like, oh, wait. Oh, this is a great record I forgot about. The next thing you know, what was I looking for? It's the TikTok mentality, you know? Just that's the best video I've ever seen on TikTok. Oh, I lost it. Ooh, what's this? Like it's just it's ridiculous. It's crazy. But I guess that's just the way the world's going now with content and stuff. Like it's all that's why I love when I can speak with someone like you who's on that same wavelength, who like, you know, we grew up listening to records. I mean, for God's sakes, before I played video games or even really was super into a lot of TV shows, I used to sit in my room with my headphones on and just listen to records all day and all night when I wasn't at school. Like that was just what I did.
Yeah.
It was all Nickelback records, but that's beside the point.
No, nothing wrong with that.
No, dude, I am that Nickelback fan. Like since day one, bro. Like since
you know what?
since the state, man.
Like when I was a kid, I liked Nickelback, and then I think I fell for that Nickelback sucks thing, and like it was maybe 2-3 years ago that my singer Mike was like, you should listen to Nickelback. I think you'd really like them. And yeah, Nickelback slaps.
Like I don't know, man. I say to people like, yo, if you're a guitar player, right, and you can at least appreciate some of the stuff that Nickelback has done, especially like you go back to like Silver Side Up. I'm like,
that's
dude,
a great one.
Like, I mean, hell, one of my favorite guitar solos ever is from The Long Road, man. It's Someday. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. It's super short. Really, it's basically like a vocal part, but for whatever reason, that's my number 2, you know? It just is what it is. I'm like, I love this song. But I think there's something to be said for content creators like yourself who really appreciate, you know, the way things used to be with music. And I think that getting back into the podcast for a second, like that's what makes what you do so interesting with your podcast, because you have that, I don't want to say old school, but like that last generation, because we're of the same generation, right? Like it's like that.
Yeah.
We were the last generation of music listeners who really appreciated records and who really appreciated maybe learning people's names who are in the band and learning about them and wanting to know everything about them. Like, I mean, I used to be almost as interested in the people in the band than I was about, you know, the oh yes, this song's great, but like I want to know what's the singer's name, who are his influences, what's he into, so I can look into that stuff. Who's the guitar player, what's he into? Like,
and that's why you interview artists.
Exactly, because I want to know this information. And that's why I assume is the same thing with you when you know, like to go to talk about your chat with Danny Miles from July Talk. Like I gotta imagine, and also, you know, with the spill as well, that's probably a reason why you got into that, I would have to assume, right?
Yeah. Interviews are a lot of fun. Like, you know it, like they're a ton of fun. And, you know, when I started writing for the spill, like I don't know, I have no idea when that was actually. But when I started writing for the spill, I had already been writing for 2 other online media outlets, the Canadian Beats and the Heavy Press. And, you know, I started writing for the spill. And at one point my editor was like, do you want to interview artists? And it felt like a no-brainer. It was like, of course, I would love to talk to someone about what they do. And the first interview I ever had was with Chuck Mosley, who had once sung for Faith No More, and it was at one point part of Bad Brains, and was just kind of this alternative cult icon type guy. And it was such a cool feeling because I went in with all my notes and we had this phone call, and it was a nothing all that unique kind of a conversation, because I didn't know how to make the questions unique at that point. Like I was probably asking the same questions that everyone else was asking. But it was just such a cool experience to be like, wait, I'm talking to someone that has made these records, and talking to someone that has done these things, and getting him to share some of these stories. It was really, really cool. So yeah, like I've been doing that since then. And with Danny Miles, it was just like, I'm so grateful that he took a chance on my podcast, because, I guess I should start from the beginning, but I went to see July Talk play at Massey Hall in January of 2023. I want to say it was the first of 2 or 3 shows that they were doing, fully sold out. It was like an amazing show. I knew I was going to have a good time, but it was one of those shows where like you see the band playing and you just kind of like, you figure it out. Like you realize why people love them as much as they do. And that was one of those nights. It was a really cool experience. But like, walking outside, it was cold because it was January, February. I saw him outside the venue, and he was just having a smoke with his bassist. They were chatting, people were asking for pictures, and I saw him, and like I didn't really want to, like, it was cold and there was just a lot of people around, but I was super curious about his gear because the drums sounded phenomenal. So I, just kind of like snuck past the people, and I was like, I loved your snare drum. What was it? And he was using like a custom YC built for him, which was really cool. And it turned out that the specs of his snare were very similar to my custom VW. So we kind of were just like, oh, that's awesome. And like, that was it. We spoke for like 2 minutes. I walked to my car. I followed him on Instagram. He followed me back. And then when it came time to doing the podcast, I was, I always wanted it to be a platform to do interviews. And I've only done the one so far, but I've always wanted this to kind of be like me talking about records that I like, but also, talking to people and their stories about records that they like and about their art. So I think I had an episode recorded and I just shot him a message being like, hey, like, this is my brand new podcast. Would you be interested in coming on? And, he didn't even like, I don't even know if he listened to the first episode right away, but he was just like, yeah, I would love that. That sounds like a great time. And so I'm just so appreciative that he did that, because, like I approached him with one episode of a podcast. Like there is no foundation of credibility to what I was doing. I still don't know if there's a foundation of much credibility, but getting that kind of validation from someone who very easily could have said, maybe should have said no, that early on in the game was, it was a really nice feeling.
Well, and I think from the standpoint of someone in his position, like when you immediately get on the same level of somebody, meaning like, you were asking him about drums, which is something obviously he's very passionate about. So you approach him as a drummer asking a question about his drum set, automatically that's got to be like, okay, like, and then you talk to yourself for a few minutes, Gerrod, and you're like, okay, clearly this guy is passionate about music and loves music and is easy to talk to. Like, okay, like this is a good dude. Like, he's not some weirdo, who's going to be like, hey man, so like, tell me about like your deepest desires in life. Like we're going to just have a good, fun conversation, because I'm sure he's had plenty of interviews where it's like, hey man, so I read this about you. Is that true? Yeah, cool. Okay. Hey man, so like I read this about you. Is that true as well? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, so he's like, okay, if I talk with this guy in a podcast, it's going to be a whole different vibe. He's a good dude. And I mean, I think that is almost more important than credibility, because even though, yes, you were one episode in, it's like, okay, worst case scenario, I talk with this guy and I spend, an hour and a half or half an hour or whatever talking with this guy and nothing comes of it. I have fun. whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then who knows, maybe he does it and you become the biggest podcaster in the world. Like, who knows? So I think it's well worth the risk to take, especially when it's okay, this dude clearly has a passion for what he does.
Yeah. Joe Rogan's got to watch out.
Listen, man, 2024 is your year, bro. Joe who? Like, well, listen, you do happen to be talking to the Joe Rogan of Ontario. So, it's
I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Jeez. Someone said that once as a joke, and I bring it up and forget. Anyway, but that's what I do when I can't transition properly. Excuse me, folks. But yeah, and that's what's so fun about doing interviews is you can, like I like to, that's why I love to speak with people who are, maybe have never done an interview before. That's something I really love to do. And I've been a lot of musicians' first interviews, which is always like, it's always exciting because I'm just like,
yeah, that's cool.
I'm just like, listen, man, you're starting off here. You can only go up from here. Like you start with me. And then next thing you know, I see them on other podcasts and I'm like, oh, look at them go there. This is so much better than what we did. Oh my gosh. Like, this is great. So it's like, it makes me excited to do that. For yourself, is the plan to still continue to do interviews as much as you do love the content that you do with kind of focusing on the albums? Do you have plans to do more interviews in the future?
Yeah, I would love to. I've been trying to plant some seeds in the last few weeks to try and get a few more going for 2024. I don't have any in the works at the moment, but I would absolutely love to be doing that because, I mean, to me, like Beats by Jer started off as something that I wanted to do as a means of expressing that sort of creative itch that I had. And part of that is talking to other artists, right? Part of that is not just like what I think about records, but like getting people to talk about their creativity and how they find expression in that, and tell me about what they're doing and the work that they think is important to them. Like, I think that is so important. And I mean, it's like you said, we're like that last generation that really cared about those things, and I care about those things. I want to know what gear you're using, or what was going on that made you write a song like that, or what was the focus with this album, what was going on, how was that tour. Those are like the things that matter to me.
And I think that there's a lot of people out there that would connect with that, and it makes some of these artists that they love, it just makes them more human, which everyone wants that. You have that human connection with them. And it's like, oh, like you find out one of your favorite musicians also loves, another musician that you love. You're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, and it just it helps everyone connect more, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. 100%.
Definitely. So, well, obviously we have a lot more to talk about with music and that, but just before we move into that, I wanted to speak with you about kind of how you got started with the spill, because obviously, it seems like from what we've been talking about, you've had a fascination behind having conversations about music and music journalism in that regard. But where did that come from for you? And then how did you get into working with the spill?
Long story short, I don't know.
That's probably one of the most honest answers I've ever had on this podcast. I like it.
I don't know when I started writing or wanting to write. It was probably about 10 years ago now, but like, I feel like I was in university at the time. Maybe it was first year, maybe it wasn't, but it was like 10 years ago. And I think it started, I know why it started, I just don't know when, but there's this really cool series called 33 1/3. And each book in the series is written by a different author, and you go through an application process to basically write about an album and why it's important. You could see the seeds planted already for Beats by Jer. But it's a really cool series because every book is written by someone else, and every book seems to focus on a different area of importance, right? Like, I've read some that focus purely on the making of the album and like the musical, the musical innovations it had on it. Some of them have looked through them through like how like Jeff Buckley's Grace, for example, defied the male rock star image in so many ways, right? There are so many cool ways of looking at albums in this series. And, you know, I think you agree, like that's kind of one of the coolest things with art is that anyone can walk away with these different interpretations of the exact same thing. But I really wanted to write one of these books, which was so ambitious because I wasn't a writer, nor was I in school to be a writer. I just thought it was cool. And, you know, like from that age, I was like, I could fill a book with information on a record because like, that's what I am most interested about. Right. And so I was like, you know, it was ambitious. And in looking back, it's so ridiculous because I wasn't a writer. But to my credit, I recognized that and was like, I need to start writing to get good at this and then to get good. But to, you know, like learn how to write in a way that is like presentable and then also, you know, build some sort of resume. And it just so happened that that same week I went to I think it was a Queens of the Stone Age concert. And I was like right at the rail. And there was this woman taking photos of the band. And I asked her who she was taking photos for. And she gave me a business card. And her name was Jeanette. And she ran this online blog, The Heavy Press. And you know, I just kind of sent her an email from there and started writing album reviews and concert reviews for her. And it was really cool because like she would get me into shows to review them, which was like the biggest perk, right? Like I didn't need to like be paid for writing. It was like someone was going to get me into concerts, which was awesome. So from there, like I started doing that for, I don't know how long. And then eventually I also I just wanted to write more to really just develop these skills. So I found Canadian Beats, which is another online source that looks at Canadian music of all genres. And I started writing for them and I did that for a couple of years. And then I have no idea how I found the Spill, but I did. And like I ended up on their homepage and there was a huge banner on the top of the site that said "Write for us." And because I guess I just don't like having enough free time to myself, I immediately clicked on
I'm sorry. I'm the same with stuff like that. So
you recognize it. Yeah. Like if you run a podcast, you could have free time, but you have chosen to you've chosen to do this. So like you get it.
I just remember my wife saying that to me the other day. I was telling her about my new podcast I'm doing in the new year. And she's just like, you just hate having free time, don't you? Like you just don't.
I came to that conclusion a long time ago. And sometimes I think about having free time, but then I'm like, but what would I do?
What would I do? Like, what would I do with my hands?
What would I do? I don't know.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But yeah, so I clicked on the link and I sent them an email saying like, this is all the work I've done. And they got back to me super quick. And I've been writing for the Spill magazine since. And I feel like that was like 2016 or 17.
Well, it was at least 2016 because that's when the interview with Chuck Mosley was out. Because I think he passed away in 2017. So I looked earlier while you were talking about it, and I think it was around 2016 when it came out at least. So just for the timeline.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess it was 2016 that I did that then. Maybe I started in 2015. Oh, I don't know anymore.
Sometime in that time frame.
Yeah, sometime in that time it happened. Yeah. And like since then, I no longer write for the Heavy Press or for Canadian Beats because it was just a lot. but with the Spill magazine, again, like they were offering me interviews, and just like the heavy press, it was like, do you want to go see these shows and write about them? And I've had the experience to get albums early, which is always super cool. Like a couple years ago, I had to sign an NDA for Welcome to America, that Prince record that came out after his passing.
Wow.
And like
That's
they sent
cool.
it to me like 2 months in advance. And it was so like I have the love symbol tattooed on my arm. Like I love Prince. And they sent it to me. They sent it to me and they were like, you can't write about this yet, but here it is. And you know, like the review can't be published until the album's out. But that was like really cool. I still have that NDA printed out somewhere.
You know, you've made it in some regard when you have to sign an NDA. You know, I mean, listen, I had to sign an NDA for the new Seagrave record that I had on the show earlier this year. But no, shout out to the homies in Seagrave. But yeah, they were like, yeah, TJ, bro, we need you to sign this NDA. No, but oh, geez,
You know what?
I love it.
It's so rare. I've never been offered it that before, because most of the publicists that I deal with, they have like digitally watermarked links. So if you leak the album, they can find which person they sent the link to.
Oof.
And then they'll just blacklist you.
And
so
yeah, you don't want to be
like
that
I've never had to sign an NDA before that or since that. It's always been like, this is watermarked. Open it on the device you're going to listen to it. Because if we see it's on multiple devices, like you're going to be revoked.
Which you don't ever want to be that guy that
No, like, of course not. Because like it's not just for me; it would be revoked for the Spill magazine as a whole. Right?
I didn't even think of that.
That's a problem.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Has there been? I have to ask, just in your time interviewing musicians, has there ever been stuff that they've said during their conversation that they're just like, maybe don't print that?
Nothing like bad.
Okay, that's good.
Nothing bad. You sometimes like that happens more often than you think, because they'll say something about like an upcoming release.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about.
And then like they're like, oh, and you like I get it, because like when you're sitting on new music, it's exciting and that's all you want to talk about. And also like it's a way to make the interviews more fun, because most people are going to be asking the same questions. So I get it. And whenever someone says something like that, I'll always kind of ask them. If they don't say anything, I'll ask them at the end, like, hey, you mentioned this, like, is that something that I could write about? And sometimes they're like, yeah, whatever. And sometimes they're like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I had, you'll appreciate this. It's just a really quick story. I had someone on the show who remained nameless. And it wasn't a musician, just for the record, but while we were on the show, both of us may or may not have had a couple of beers beforehand. So this gentleman was not quite sober, and I'm a huge fan of his. So like, it was really cool to just have him be super loose and fun. But right around near the end of the podcast, he started talking about how he wanted to do this giveaway for all his listeners and all his fans and stuff. And like, he was like, yeah, bro, TJ, man, I love you, man. We're going to do this. So you guys got to listen to this podcast. And at some point I talked about this. And if you tell me what that was in a message, I'll give you this and this. And he was talking about like giving all this stuff away. And I was like, holy shit, like this could be a huge thing for me. Right. But I was also like, yeah, maybe. So anyway, a couple days later, his, like the person who helps manage his stuff was like, hey, so, because I sent like an advance copy to them first to listen through, and she's like, yeah, could we cut that whole sentence? Just get rid of that whole thing that happened. Like, I was like, yeah, no problem. She's like, I know it might be a really cool thing for you, but like, that's going to probably cost us a lot of money. I was like, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
I always think of that because the only time anything that's really happened to me. So I'm like, I wonder if that's happened to you in like you're talking with someone and they're like, oh shoot, don't print that.
It's usually like, oh, we're hoping to have this album out by next spring. And then like sometimes, you know what, like it's interesting because I've done some, because it's usually phone calls. And if they're doing a whole press cycle, they might be like on a conference call with their PR agent on the other line as well.
Oh,
And like
okay.
I've like sometimes the artist will hang up at the end of it, and then like the PR agent will come on and they'll be like, hey, just a heads up, they said this, let's not put that in the article because that is either wrong or we haven't announced that yet, and we can't just like have that as a throwaway in
Oh
your interview.
gosh.
And I get it. You know, it's just like it happens a lot.
How again, this is me asking you questions because it's fascinating to me. How has your experience been dealing with PR people overall? Like,
Really good,
okay,
really
cool.
good. Yeah, and I would say lately it's been like exceptional. But early on, I looked at them as like not gatekeepers in the way that people use the word now, but like they were just the people that were offering me these cool experiences. So I was always like, oh, whatever they say goes. And it worked out. And like, it wasn't like I was like going against stuff that, you know, like it wasn't like, oh, I have to do everything they want. It's just like they were saying like very simple things like be available at this time and you will have the, you know what I mean? But it was very easy from the get go. I always found. Um, I think there was like one time that like a PR agent like double booked me and like tried to blame me, but like I had the emails there, and but like that, like there have been a few times where I've been double booked by accident, and the PR person's like apologizing profusely because like they look back and they're like, oh no, I messed up, right? So like PR people have been great because, and I mean, like if you just think about the job, right? Like they get hired by a record label or an artist, so you know they get rehired by that same artist again based off of how well press went in the last cycle, right? So like it's their job to kind of facilitate the artist needs, but also the writer's needs, you know. But like lately it's been really awesome, because I've been working with some of the same PR people for years now, and some of them like when they hear that it will be me covering like their artist's album or tour or interview, you know, they get a little more like, oh, that's awesome, it's Gerrod, great, which is a really nice feeling on my end, because it could be the opposite. It could be like, can we get someone else?
Yeah, like that would be just like,
Right.
oh, it's not Jared. Ah, geez,
Yeah,
man. Can we get
yeah.
anyone
And
else you have?
like the like the this has only happened once. It happened like a month ago, but I've been covering Dirty Honey for the Spill magazine like since they started, right? Like I've reviewed all their records. I interviewed their guitar player and bassist a few years ago. And they've had the same PR rep the whole time. So I finally got to see them live in November at the Danforth Music Hall. And it was an awesome show. They're such a cool band. But I wrote a review, and at that point, I knew their PR agent had read my album review because she used one of my quotes as the lead quote in their press kit, which is always a really
Oh,
cool
dude,
feeling
that's got
when,
to be an honor almost, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that one happens fairly. Like I don't want to just be over here like saying like look at me,
No,
but
bro,
like
go
that one
for it.
happens it happens quite a bit, and it's always an amazing feeling, especially when it's like an artist that you like really love, and like they have like a quote that you put and underneath it says the Spill magazine, and you're like, oh, that's me, that's cool. But she used one of my quotes in the Dirty Honey press kit, and after my live coverage she like sent an email to my editor like basically just saying like how much she appreciates how I've consistently covered her artists for the last couple of years, and like how I, you know, like just, you know, like how I'm a consistent source of great quotes for her and things like that. And it was like my editor passed it on to me, and I was like, oh wow, that is such a nice feeling. um PR people are awesome, I find.
That's really cool. To be honest, I haven't really had much experience with them in my journey. So like, it's just always fascinated me because that whole world just, I don't know. It seems like so fascinating to me just to be like, your only job is to try and keep everybody happy when you're doing
Yeah,
this. And it's like, it seems
plus
like the
like the
hardest job in the world.
organization, because
Yeah.
like a lot of them work in teams, right? And like each one is assigned a particular project, but they're like emailing everyone in their contact list like this artist is open for interviews or album reviews or whatever, and like they have to facilitate all of that for
Mhm.
like probably a couple months, I would assume. Like the organization that goes into it is crazy.
As someone who was not organized at all, it's like, whoa, you're thinking that far ahead. Holy crap. Like I'll be happy if I think like a couple weeks ahead. Like that's a stretch for me. That's awesome though, dude. Like you've done some really awesome work with the Spill, man. And I wish you all the best with continuing to just have quotes for awesome bands on their press kit releases and stuff like that. Like it's really cool to see, man. You've you're an inspiration to me to try and get better at this craft, because even though you're new in the podcast world, it's like, you know, the fact that you have been interviewing some really amazing big artists, like that's so cool for me to look at. 'Cause it's like, man, like I've always been kind of, I don't know if scared's the right word, but like hesitant to try and really break into that world. 'Cause I'm like, I'm really happy with what I do, but like, it might be cool to try that. And I'm like, I don't know.
Totally try it. You have such a natural voice for this, and like having this conversation with you, like I am learning so much about how you interview people, and it's been a cool experience in that sense.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. And same to you, man. Like I'm just like, clearly, like I would love to see you do more interviews, not just obviously with musicians, but also just people in the industry. I think it would be, I'd tune into every episode, man. 'Cause it'd be just
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
Because you also obviously being a killer musician yourself. Let me try that again. Obviously being a killer musician yourself, which we're going to jump into here. Like you have experience kind of almost on all sides, where you're a performing musician who is in a killer band, and you're brilliant musician yourself, and you're playing. I actually got to see you guys totally by accident. I don't know if you knew about this, but it was right around the time I had Christian on the show. Actually, you guys played at Pyrofest in Lindsay.
2 years ago? Was that? Yeah, we did it this year, but we also were there in 2022.
Yes, yeah. And I was randomly there, and there was a band playing, and I was like, okay, cool. We were really far from the stage, and all of a sudden, I hear this guitar tone, and I was like, oh, like what is that? Because I think the band playing before, they were a great band, but they were like a full-on classic rock cover band, like, you know. And then I heard the drum kick, and I was like, oh, like I felt it in my chest, and I was like, yo, like this band is going to be awesome. And I'm hanging out with my wife and her friend and her boyfriend, and I'm like, guys, like I kind of want to go check this band out. And as I'm walking towards the stage, all I see is your guys' logo. And I was like, are you kidding me? So I start running towards the stage like an idiot, like jumping over people. And I was like, look, like I know that if I say who I am, you guys will know who I am, because I'm like, hey, it's TJ from the Harder Show. But I was like, yeah, especially with Christian, I'm like, I just had him on the show. So I'm like just running, and I was like, yeah, oh my God, guys. But then like you guys are like setting up. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, what's going on, guys? I was all happy. But yeah, you guys absolutely fucking killed it. Absolutely killed it.
So
especially
much.
When
that was a lot of fun, that show.
Especially when, like, you know, it's got to be a tough spot to be in. That's the only thing I'll say, is because everyone knows after you guys, it's like the pyro starts. So it's like you guys are putting on this killer performance, but at the same time, I got to think you're mindful of the fact that, okay, as soon as we're done, they're going to start blowing stuff up. Like,
yeah, I mean, that was pretty cool though, right? Yeah. Like that was like, and that Pyrofest, that fireworks show was so incredible as well.
Yeah, it was wild. I just had to bring up the fact that I was like, this is going to be like an awesome show. And then I was like, wait a second, I know that logo. And I was like, there's no way that I missed that on the sheet that I was looking at, like, oh, like what's going on? Who's playing? Okay, cool. And I was like, yo, I think it was just the short form. So like maybe that's what threw me off. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up as we shift into music.
That's so
here.
Cool.
But
yeah. What a happy little accident.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I was so excited, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, just because with this podcast, like there's a lot of bands that are in Ontario, but I don't get to see a lot of you guys play. So like,
Yeah.
even like, just to bring up my boys in Seagrave again for a sec, like I have been covering the vocalist Chris's music in some way, shape or form, basically since like 2018, but I'd never seen the guy play until this year. Like it just, you
Wow.
keep missing things. And, I'm in Peterborough. So like, for me to drive to Toronto for a show on a Thursday night.
Yeah. And like, as a band from Toronto, like we're lucky if we play Peterborough twice
of course.
a year.
If you guys come out, I don't know if you've been out here recently, but yeah, ever since I've moved here, I'm like, anytime a band's like coming out to Peterborough, I'm like, yo, let's go. I haven't missed one of the homies yet. That's my, I always try. I'm like, I gotta go. I've left.
We'll see you next time for sure.
I've left work to go. Don't tell my boss, but yeah, boss, I'm gonna go on an extended break. Is that okay? Yeah, cool. All right. I'm gonna go see Nothing Serious. What's up? I love it. But man, how did it all start with you with music? What was some of the first music you ever heard? What started this journey for you?
My family always, like, they're not musical, but they always listened to a lot of music. And it was like a lot of like classic rock greatest hits CDs, like Aerosmith, Van Halen, the Rolling Stones, Zeppelin, like a lot of stuff like that. Like I can clearly picture like the best of both worlds and like Mothership and like other greatest hits that were like huge in the 2000s and like stuff like that. So that was like music was always around. Lots of Bowie, lots of like Prince. Oddly enough, like my mom was like really into the Chili Peppers too, which didn't quite fit with everything else, but it was fine by me. Just lots of stuff like that. And then in the 7th grade, we had to pick a musical instrument, and I had zero musical aspirations. I didn't want to do anything with music at all. Because music classes up to that point were like clapping and recorders, right? So like I didn't make the connection of wanting to do this.
Throw back to the recorders.
Yeah, the essential skill that is hot cross buns.
Just really quick before you move on, you know what kind of pisses me off now with music schools now? Well, not music schools, but like music classes nowadays, from what I see anyway. So many of them do the ukulele now. And
yeah,
I'm like, bro,
a lot of them do the ukulele.
Where
now.
Was this 15 years ago?
Yeah, that would have been a lot cooler. I also think that's a lot more accessible for people to learn. But the ukulele is where it's at. But yeah, so I chose the drums because it was the only instrument in the room that was in a rock band. And like my parents were amazing. They went out and bought like this beginner kit. And like I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't even know what sound. Like I can distinctly remember being like a kid hitting the drums and not being able to like match the sounds that I was hearing on the record. Like I didn't really know what the drums did, So then like the Chili Peppers are on tour. It was the Stadium Arcadium tour, and I couldn't get tickets. So I went to see Chad Smith do a drum clinic over in, I think it was in Oshawa. But he did a drum clinic, and it was so eye-opening and cool because like I didn't know what a drum clinic was. I didn't know what drums did. I just wanted to go see someone from like my favorite band. So I went to this drum clinic, and like it was just one of those moments where everything clicks, and it was like I want to do that. Like that is what I want to do. I want to do that. And my parents again just surprised me with an incredible drum instructor and got me private lessons, and it very quickly went from being like this thing of like, if I have to do this for 2 years in school, to being everything that I wanted to do. Right. Because like I started playing the drums seriously and started like listening to songs myself and like piecing together and learning by ear. And in high school, I was in the jazz bands and the concert bands. And then I ended up going to to university to study jazz performance, like it very quickly became, it went from nothing to everything very, very quickly.
So in your opinion, how important is it? Because obviously from what you just said, you're obviously a very schooled drummer, which is awesome. And you can tell, even with myself, I can always tell when guys are like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. This isn't just, some guy, playing rock beats, bro. It's like, no, there's a little more to this than just, slamming out some sick rock beats. For you, how important do you think it is for people to have a true musical education?
What do we mean by a true musical
so
education?
For me, learning like the actual theory behind things, and hey, why you play this chord in this way, or why you structure things the way you do, instead of just kind of doing the rock and roll thing and just like, I'm just gonna figure this out. Like, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I guess I'm a middle point between these two attitudes, because theory is not something that has stuck with me.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I went to jazz school. I went to York University and studied jazz performance, but I barely passed most of my theory courses.
Okay. And the only reason I said that is because I assume like that would be like such a massive part of it that like.
No, like when you're a drummer, like, and to any drummer that is super confident in these things, incredible. Like, they did it. Because like when you are a drummer, most of us learn by ear, right? So like I can read music and all of that, but I don't do it often. And if I'm learning a new song, like I'm going to listen to the song and I'm going to learn it structurally and what the drummer's doing by listening to it, because that's kind of what I've always like, that's always my first resort. So like I find most drummers, like myself included, like reading is always the area that you could benefit from knowing more. In terms of like how important these things are, I am always of the belief that knowing these things can only help you, right? I think there's value in raw creativity, that sort of creativity that isn't guided by knowledge, because then you're exercising a different part of you as a songwriter, you as a performer, by playing what feels right or what sounds right. I think there's a lot of value in that, but I also think that as a musician, like if you can get a grasp of these things and understand and make them transferable into something that sounds good, like why wouldn't you, right? I think it's incredibly important, but at the same time, there are so many artists that don't know a thing, and they're so incredibly influential, right? Because that's what's really cool about writing songs. You don't have to know what you're doing to write a song that resonates with people and just sounds really good.
I mean, you look at like someone like, I mean, everyone brings him up in this conversation, but you look at Dave Grohl. He talks about all the time how he's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know why this chord progression sounds good. I couldn't tell you anything, but it's not even arguably, he's without a doubt one of the top songwriters of our generation. I mean, he has to be in that conversation at least.
Yeah. Whether you like him or not,
right.
You're not going to tell Dave Grohl that he can't write a good song.
Yeah.
What a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah, no,
that
absolutely. So it's always fun to ask musicians who, even if you have a little bit of background in learning theory and that, because I never did. And it's always something I regret, not learning theory, just so that I understand at least a little bit more about, why does this sound good? Why do you place this thing here in the song? What is all this? So it's always
I understand the basics, but it's never been to steal the word you used earlier, it's never been fluent for me. It's always been something that, like, even when I understand it, there is a process of thinking about it and looking at it and being like, yes, that makes sense. Whereas like Cecil or Chris in the band are so well versed in these things, like they'll just like do something and they're like, oh, this won't work because of this. And like, I'll be sitting there like quietly listening and being like, I understand why, but like the fact that you just knew that is really cool. like Cecil in particular is just so like you could just say something to him like, hey, play this chord instead, and like even without playing it, without like looking at it, he's like, no, that won't work, and he'll like tell you why, and you're just like, oh, you're right, that makes no sense. And like it's really cool to see.
That's just fascinating to me, and it trips me out because I'm like, I know a couple of cats like that I've jammed with in the past, and like when I was younger, it used to annoy me because I'm like, well, you can't even try. And then like now it's like, oh, that's why you can't, because it literally sounds terrible. Okay, cool. Like it's just like, believe me at face value, man, that's not going to work. Or like when a drummer writes a guitar part, you know, it's just like, dude,
Yeah.
what is happening here? What am I looking at? Like, it's fantastic. But that's also cool that you guys can have that dynamic with all of you, because I think that which is what makes such a great rock band, like with what you guys are and what makes you such a great player. But with the great player that you are there any drummers specifically that you would say really influenced you into the player that you are? Like I know like you've mentioned Red Hot Chili Peppers a couple of times, and
Yeah, Chad Smith
like,
for sure. Yeah.
he's such a great
Like
player, dude.
yeah, he like really lit that spark. But like what I noticed that I really enjoy about drummers the most is, and maybe you hear it in my playing, I hope you do, but I'm not one to say if you do or don't, but I really like these like big rock drummers that can really groove and like without sacrificing their power, their attack, right? Like someone like Chad Smith or John Bonham or Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine. Like these players that are so like ferocious in their power, but are so groovy at the same time. Like that to me is what like I try to do. I hope I do it, but that is to me it's what like I find I'm naturally drawn to drummers that do that so effortlessly.
Well, to be honest, you definitely do, because that's something that first time I heard one in the chamber, I was like, yes, amazing vocals, guitar, all that, like, but also from someone who always had a fascination with drums and loves drums and grooves, but can't play it. I'm always drawn to drummers like yourself who have that, like, yo, this guy is just beating the crap out of his kit, but it sounds like in a good way. Like this sounds, it's ferocious, but it's like, it's still super dynamic and tasteful. And like, I definitely.
Oh, thank you. You use my favorite word, the T word.
Yeah, it's, you definitely have all that going on, man. And it's awesome. It's, I guess, again, the T word, you know, super tasteful.
Yeah.
With
Tasteful.
that's something that I love about you guys. Like you know, good old dirty rock and roll, but it's not like throwback rock and roll. It's still like modern, and it's, you can still have some killer melodies and stuff. It's all super tasteful and it's all super groovy, and like you can dance to it, but then also there's some serious like heaviness to it. Like, yeah, there's a lot going on there for with what you guys do.
I don't think we've explicitly said that, but like that's what we try to do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because that's what I get. That's that's just one guy though, but you know, but I just wanted to bring up. Did you ever talking on Chad Smith? Did you see? I'm sure probably you were sent this TikTok or whatever a million times, but did you see him doing the whole 30 Seconds to Mars in one take video?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Wild. Like he's one of those drummers who is like, he's got to be one of the, like, he's not underrated, but like there's so much stuff, like he's so, you know, it's him as soon as you hear it.
I think he is not underrated in the sense that he plays drums for one of the biggest bands in the world, but I think he's underrated in the sense that we don't associate the skill set that he's putting into what he's doing. We associate the size of his band and his popularity as like he's great. But I think like if you really, and like I'm such a nerd, like I love the Chili Peppers. I have their logo tattooed on my arm. It was my first tattoo, and that was, you know, because Chad just lit that fire. But also I've just been listening to them my whole life. I love them so much. But like if you just listen to his drum parts, they're so well written, they're so well performed. Like they're so effortless, they're sublime, there's a little bit of technical complexity, but they just groove so hard. So like, yeah, he's not underrated, but like I think maybe it's because I champion him so much that there is something that I think is a little bit underrated. You know what I mean?
You are without a doubt a writer, my friend. That's that whole sentence was just like I was chuckling to myself because I'm like, you're so well spoken. Like just everything, I can't even repeat what you said now, but like I'm gonna listen back to this. Like, geez, that's a quote right there. I love
thank
it.
you.
But yeah, I just
if you could send it to Chad and get him on my podcast.
Oh, dude,
I will.
Listen, I'm more down to get people on other people's podcasts than I am to like, which is weird. I've done that before where I'm like, yo, you should interview this guy. And anyway, but yeah, he's such a great drummer, man. Anytime someone brings up Chad Smith, I'm like, dude, like, yeah, I loved his work. I love all his work, man.
Yeah, and I love that Drumeo series that they've been doing where it's like getting so-and-so to like hear a song they've never heard and getting them to play through it. And it's just so cool because on one hand, like there's the first moment of audacity. Like, what do you mean like Larnell Lewis has never heard Enter Sandman? But then you're like, oh, well, Larnell Lewis is a jazz R&B drummer. Like, I don't know how he avoided the song, right, but like he did, right? And like he's among the best players around. I've seen him play a few times.
Yes.
And it's just so good. But like to watch, and then like there's the second part of these videos where it's like you're seeing someone that is like without a doubt a master of what they do, and you're seeing them approach the song and not playing it necessarily note for note, but you're seeing them play it in a way that is their way. Mm-hmm. But also you're seeing like the creative gears turn of how they are processing something on the fly. Like there's that Thomas Lang one where I think he's hearing, it might have been Lux Eterna, or it's another song off the new Metallica record, and like he hears it and he's like, oh, so for 4 bars they do the hooba chaka hooba chaka hooba chaka, and like anyone that's not a drummer is like, what is he saying? But like immediately I was like, I've never said it that way, but that makes perfect sense. That clicks.
I think one of my favorite ones from that series was the cat who's playing for Megadeth now, Dirk. He did Mr. Brightside.
I don't know if I've seen that.
Dude,
one.
It is fascinating to watch because it's like, it starts off and everyone in the booth's like, and he's like, I don't know this one, and they're like, you're kidding, right? Like, come on, dude. Like you're like, come on, you don't know Mr. Brightside, really? And he's like, no, I've never heard this.
Like I understand not intentionally listening to it, but you weren't in a car somewhere in the 2000s. You weren't like
even still to this day
out in like a bar. You weren't like at a sporting event. Like, dude,
that song.
How did you how did you miss this?
That song transcends all generations. Like it's just they're like, I'll be like working in an elementary school and there'll be kids like playing songs on a stereo and it's like they're playing Mr. Brightside and I'm like, what? Like, I remember when that song came out, bro. Like what? But that one just fascinates me.
Like that song is like a meme.
Yeah.
Like I saw one about like it was like I'm losing the song name. Is it Mr. Brightside? I don't know.
There's a bunch of them out there.
Scrap that. Yeah, scrap that. I
whatever. There's a bunch.
I lost that train of thought entirely.
There's a bunch of them out there, but yeah, that whole drum roll thing, it just fascinates me. I've never been able to differentiate like the footwork and like the arm work ? To be like I can do this, I can do the arm thing sometimes, but then I'll be like, oh wait, now I got to move my feet. Okay, now you've lost me. It's
See, it's so interesting because like that clicks for me. It clicked at a very young age, but like piano, for example, goes completely above my head. And it's like the idea of multitasking between my 10 fingers perplexes me.
It's terrifying to watch a really, really good piano player. Like it's kind of like my mother's a piano teacher. And like I now as an adult, when I watch her, I'm just like, what? Like what? What are you doing? Like how are you, like, and then she'll say the same thing about guitar. Well, she'll be like, you're basically doing the same thing, but then this hand's just moving differently. And like, I don't know, the whole thing trips me out. Like when I just watch like a really, really great guitar player, like a jazz player or something. I'm just like, what is happening? I don't know. Music is so fun for me to just, I love watching and talking to people about whatever their creative craft is, because it's just fascinating to me. But especially when I can watch it, I'm just like, it's wild to me. It's always fun.
Did you read Rick Rubin's The Creative Act?
I did not, but it's actually on my list because
you should definitely read that.
I recently got into just listening to Rick Rubin talk for like an hour and a half on any chance I get, because I used to not appreciate him as a producer as much, because I was like, what's this guy doing? He's just sitting on a couch. Like, but then I can't remember where I listened to him. I think it was his chat with oh my goodness. He
did a few. He's just done a second one with Andrew Huberman, but he did one with Joe Rogan.
There was something he did.
He did a bunch that were awesome.
There was something he did with why am I going to forget his name now? The guy who sings Happy.
Pharrell.
Yes, he did this chat with Pharrell. That was like them.
Was it on the Broken Record podcast?
It was this. It was like this random. They were like in Rick Rubin's backyard.
Oh, yeah.
It was super random. I remember seeing it, and I was like,
I haven't seen that one. He's done a few like that.
Dude, it's fascinating.
Because he did one with Kendrick Lamar a few years ago,
and it was Rick Rubin.
So cool.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was Rick Rubin kind of interviewing Pharrell, but like Pharrell is so like, you can tell he's like just in awe of Rick Rubin. Like, it's so, and Pharrell's a brilliant producer and songwriter and stuff. So it's like, just listening to Rick Rubin talk about anything, I was like, okay, I get it now. Like, it took me a lot.
Yeah, I really like his conversations, especially in the last year. There's been so many of them because of the book. But like, if you like listening to him, you would really appreciate the book. But I find his way of looking at creativity and creative endeavors has really shaped how I listen to music, and really has kind of, like, if I don't like something, it's really reframed like the questions I ask myself about why I don't like it, and has made me a bit more constructive instead of just being like, oh, I don't like that. Being able to say like, oh, it's not like my thing, but I could see exactly what they're doing, and I like that. It's a really cool book, but his conversations lately have been just so, I think, beneficial for the collective, for better understanding the value of creativity and how we can all be creative beings, whether we're painting a painting or finding like a shortcut home or something like that.
It's so fun to just let the creative part of your brain take off. And I feel so bad for those people that don't have that creative, because I feel like everyone needs a creative outlet at some point. Right. Absolutely. And it's like, when you can watch someone find that creative outlet, because I've been in a lucky enough position where I've been able to help people find their creative outlet, whether it's, hey, you should try this podcasting thing, or, hey, I really want to do voice acting, bro. Like, it's not hard to get into it. Like, it's hard to be successful at it, obviously, but it's like, just try. I'll help you edit and stuff. Like, let's do it. And I got to watch my wife this year really explore like kind of like the graphic design world a little bit. And I'm cool. Dude, like, I was like, you did this? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, the hell? This is awesome. Like, where's this been? Like, what? Like, you've always been so good at drawing and stuff. I'm like, let's just do it. Like, having any kind of creative outlet is so important. Like,
absolutely. I think it's one of the most healthy things that you can do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Definitely so. And I mean, obviously, as you got into, playing drums seriously in that, in exploring that creative outlet for you, when did you start to be like, okay, I want to play in bands. I want to really make a go of this. And then how did the journey to get to one in the chamber happen?
I think I always wanted to play in bands. Like, as soon as I had that moment where drums made sense, just because like I grew up listening to bands and like being obsessed with like who was playing on what, and like the imagery and like the photo shoots and the music videos. And so I think I always, like, as soon as I could, as soon as I had a means of actually playing music. Like I think I always wanted to. And I played with some people throughout high school, but nothing that like stuck around more than a few months. And at York, like I played in a couple of jazz groups for like each year you'd be put into a jazz combo group, and that was always a lot of fun. But I was also like jamming with a lot of people and playing like rock music. And then I played the worst show I have ever played ever, and that's where I met Cecil Eugene. That's where the band kind of got started for me, because a friend of mine was in one of those jazz combo groups and he couldn't make it to perform with them. They were doing like a jazz night at the AB, which was the pub at York. And so he was like, hey, you should go play with them. So I went to fill in for my friend, and they didn't really tell me what was going on, or like everything was very much on the fly, which was fine until it wasn't. And they like at one point, like they all stopped playing and I was like, oh, like I missed my cue, like the song's over. And they're like, oh no, we're doing a drum solo here. And I was like, what is happening? Right. Like it was the worst show I've ever played. And like I went home because I had work early the next morning. So I just kind of played and left. And Cecil was speaking to the guitarist in that band about getting my number because he wanted to play with me. And so like a few weeks later, he gives me a call and he's like, yeah, I saw you play at the AB and I really want to like start a band with you. And I thought that was like the dumbest thing ever, because it was such a bad show. Like there was no reason that he should have called me that night. But he did. So like I met him, and at that point he had already met Mike, our singer and guitarist. And so the three of us started kind of jamming on some covers and bringing like stuff we'd written. And we needed a bass player, and we had a few people that were supposed to come try out with us, and not like tryouts, but just sit in a room and play music. And like they just didn't show up. And then Cecil was like, oh, I know this guy from high school, Christian, who plays bass, and he came, and it just kind of stuck from then. But that was like 2015 that this all kind of came together.
Yeah, sorry. I totally fucking kept trying to press unmute and it wasn't working. Sorry. I'm just gonna clap in a sec for a sec here.
Okay.
It's always fascinates me to hear people's journeys to bands and stuff, because like, and it's funny that, that's how you guys made the connection. Cause it's like, oh, that was the worst show of my career, but there's obviously something there to be like, okay, this guy's like, there's something going on. Like there's something going on with that drummer here. Like there's more to it.
I wouldn't have called me, but he did.
I wouldn't have called me. It's kind of like, okay, this guy's got some chops. Maybe he's just not a jazz drummer. Which is cool, man. And, since then, I mean, you guys have had an awesome career so far. And I mean, you're still just absolutely rocking and rolling, pun intended with that statement. But like, with this year specifically, you guys have had a lot of really cool things that you've done. Obviously, taking the year to promote the vinyl release. You played some festivals and played new areas. Walk me through kind of some of the things that you guys have got up to this year.
Yeah, it was a really fun year. Vinyl has always been something that we've wanted to do. Like I myself like love records. And like I've always loved records. So having like we put the first two EPs that we did, 2018's I've Got Something to Say and 2022's Reload, we put them onto one record because they're EPs, and it was so exciting to have that. And to like, I was working with Indie Pool to bring it all together, and like the inserts and all that. It was like a big learning curve on my part to format everything the way they needed to. And like, how do you make a vinyl insert? Like it had not been something that I'd been doing. but it was a lot of fun to put together. Um, and yeah, I want to say it was March we released that, and that was just, it was so cool to be able to, because we've done CDs, and of course everything's available on all streaming services, but to have something that was physical and more substantial, at least in my opinion, than CDs, it was really, really cool. Um, but yeah, we played a bunch of festivals. We went out to Quebec for the first time, and we went to Belterre, Quebec, which is this really tiny town in northern Quebec, but they put on this festival in this, like, they built like a stage at the end of a hockey rink, and they use it every year, and it's so well done. And it doesn't have an address. They were just like, drive to the end of the road and then look for the church. It's very tall, and once you find the church, the stage is across the street from there. Like, those were the instructions that we were given, you know what I mean? Like, and it was the coolest experience, right? Like, it was such a cool festival, right? A couple hundred people there, and everyone was so fantastic. And they put us up for the night in this like vacation trailer, out of the goodness of their heart. Like, not even the people that were doing the festivals, but just like the neighbors that were willing to work to put this all together were like, yeah, you could stay in our trailer. It was such a cool experience. It was like a 7-hour drive, but it was a ton of fun. And we played a few other festivals, right? Like Canadian Music Week. We did the Pyro Fest once again. Gussapalooza up in Innisfil area was a ton of fun as well. Those outdoor summer shows are just always so incredible. Like, playing on a stage that's outside in the sun is just such a fantastic feeling. And they always turn out to be like just great shows. But we did all that stuff in the summer, and we just kind of closed out our year with like a show that we put up from the ground up. We hosted a Christmas party concert, rocking around the Christmas tree, and it was partially funded by the city of Mississauga through a grant pilot program that they're testing out to invigorate live music within the city. And we got sponsorship from Long and McQuaid, Mississauga, from the Living Arts Center, and we partnered with CP24 Chum FM's Christmas Wish, right? Because we wanted to do something around the holidays. It was Mike's idea to do like a Christmas concert, and from there, him and I were like, well, we should definitely do a toy drive because 'tis the season, right? And it was a success. We've never done a show entirely from the ground up like that before, but it was a success. And we had a goal of one tall moving box of toys, but I had bought a second one just in case. But like, the goal was really to fill one of these boxes with toys, and we ended up filling 2 of them. So it was beyond our expectations in every way. It's such a great feeling to be able to do something that you're passionate about, but then do it in a way that helps other people and benefits a greater community than just like, we played a show and it was fun. It was like, all around, it was just such a cool experience. And then because of its success, CP24 actually invited us onto their Donor of the Day segment a few weeks ago to talk about the event and to talk about like the benefit of just like being able to do things like this for the community, which was a really fun experience. But like, it was just so rewarding to be able to fill up twice as many boxes of toys based off of just the attendance of your show. It was great.
That's so awesome, man. Like, especially the fact that you were able to do more than what you wanted. That's got to be an awesome feeling. And you got to play a great rock show, like you said, right? Like, that's,
exactly. Yeah.
If you can do what you love and benefit other people by doing it in some way, I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Like,
it's such a great feeling to be able to support like the community in a way that is tangible. You know what I mean? Like, obviously music is important. Obviously, um, putting on shows is important. Like, there are so many articles or like books that are dedicated to like the benefit of the arts and how it benefits the person doing it and how like it benefits the community of observing arts and participating in the creative cycle as the audience. But like, to me, like, as valuable as those things are, they're not necessarily tangible or measurable, right? Like, how much better off am I by going to a show and witnessing it as an audience member? How much better off am I from expressing my creativity? And while I could probably say significantly better, because it's what we do, um, it's not tangible, right? You can't hold that. But like, when you are doing a toy drive and you can double your metric for success, knowing that this is going to make, you know, things easier for a family in need. It's going to make like the holidays a little more exciting for a child who, you know, is just going to get something a little extra, right? Like, it's such a great feeling to know that you are doing good in a measurable way.
I equate it to, like, you know, you can have, there's something I always say about, like, you can have an impact on countless people by doing one action. And in helping that, even if, you know, you do this tour drive and, you know, you're able to help a family or two or a couple or whatever have a great Christmas that they may not have maybe been able to have, then in turn, they, you know, are in a better place, hopefully. Then, you know, they affect other people too with kindness, hopefully. And, you know, before you know it, like, it's this trickle down effect of you do one kind action and then it can affect who knows how many countless people, right? Especially this time of year. Like, this time of year is so hard for a lot of people in so many ways. So it's like, to be able to have this great rock show go over what you wanted and help make Christmas better for some families, like, that's awesome. And what a great way to end the year off.
Yeah, trickle down kindness works. Not like trickle down economics, but trickle down kindness. That's something
Yes.
that we should be talking about. I actually just finished reading Be Useful: 7 Tools for Life from Arnold Schwarzenegger. And his whole last chapter of the book is looking at like just being kind and how we can give back to people through what we do, whatever it may be. Right. And how when you give back, it, you know, can start that chain up of kindness, of caring actions towards the community and other communities and people in need. And it's just such a nice way of thinking about how we should be approaching our lives. Right.
And it can be something as simple as just being polite to somebody when, you know, maybe you don't necessarily have to be polite to somebody. But like, if you are, hey, maybe you being polite to that person who maybe they're having a bad day and you just being polite. Like, oh, that guy was polite to me. Huh. Cool. Maybe it helps bring them out of their funk a little bit. Next thing you know, they're polite to somebody. Next thing you know, it just goes on. And it's like, it's such a small thing. It's so much easier sometimes to just be kind to people than just be miserable. And I find for me, if I'm just in a miserable mood, if I'm just like overtly polite and kind to somebody, it'll kind of like, it's almost a selfish thing sometimes too, right? Because it's like, as much as I want to just be polite to everybody and kind to everyone, because it's just, that's how I want to live my life. It's like, if I'm just having a bad day, I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and I'm just like, but if I'm just like, you know, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, have a great day. Thanks so much. Whatever. Like, even just at the drive-thru, you know, I'm just like, how you doing today? Oh, awesome. Like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Here's a tip. Like, whatever. Cool. Have a good day. Like, I feel better about myself too. Cause I'm like, what am I still miserable?
Yeah. Kindness, even if it's self-serving, is still kindness. That's the nice thing about it.
And that's not the only reason why you should be kind, just for the record, folks.
Oh, of course not. No.
It's also like, for me, I'm like, sometimes if I'm just, like I said, if I'm in that headspace, or if I'm in that headspace and someone's kind to me, like, I'm like, you know how much that means to people?
Yeah, we've all been there.
You know how much it means to people when they have some kind of creative endeavor they're doing, and you take 5 seconds out of your day to click a download button or click a play button or message them and be like, oh man, like I love the song, like blah blah, like that means so much to people to know that something they're doing, regardless of what they're doing, if you take the time to acknowledge what they're doing and or check in on them or whatever, like it doesn't take much, and you'll be amazed what it can do.
For sure. I 100% agree.
Definitely so, man. Well, as we are getting ready to wrap up the chat here, you've had a killer 2023 as far as from a creative standpoint with the podcast and the band and everything. What does 2024 hold for you?
Oh, I knew this question was coming, and I don't know. Definitely more podcasts. I'm working today. I'll be working on the first episode for the new year. And like we discussed, like the goal is to get more artists and maybe, like you were saying, industry figures onto the podcast and have those conversations, because I like your podcast a lot because you just get so many different perspectives on there. You know what I mean? And that's always like a really cool thing. Like it's cool to be able to express yourself, but it's also cool to have a platform that allows for other people to be heard. So that is one of the big goals there. With the band, I can't really say too much, but I can say that we did spend a lot of time in 2023 making a really unique and different record for us. And all I can really say is that there will be new music this year, which is so thrilling to be able to say.
Ooh, maybe a little rap metal or something.
No, a different direction entirely.
Just kidding, folks. Just kidding. I'm not gonna lie though.
I think you went one way on the spectrum, and we went the opposite.
Okay.
But
okay, yeah. Cool. I'm for it either way. I just, I'm all in on the new metal revival that's happening right now. So I was like, you never know. That was just a joke, folks. Just a joke. But Gerrod, man, I can't thank you enough for the time, brother. It's been great getting to chat with you and hear all about your just crazy journey in this world of podcasting and music and writing. And it's you're an inspiration to me, man, to just keep trying to get better at this. And I'm so happy that you not only took the plunge to start doing the podcast, but that you've been doing it and have had some success with it, man.
Oh, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, because A, you had me on here, and B, and most importantly, you are the one that got this started. And, I don't know if you necessarily meant to get this started, but you really, like, that conversation we had really set the course for this. And it's so cool to be able to come on here and have this conversation with you and have something that actually exists from previous conversations. So thank you.
Nah, man, I'm honored to have had a small part in it. And just as we go here, there's always a staple question I ask everybody to end off the podcast. Tell me either your favorite show that you've ever played or a story from just the worst show you ever played. I know you kind of already covered that, but give me one or the other or both if you have one.
Favorite show we've ever played. That is so tough. That is so challenging. I'm going to cheat because I already told you about Belter, so I'm going to cut that one out. But Belter really was like rock star shit. Like, that was a really cool weekend to drive out to Quebec and play this festival. But I'll take that one out just for the simplicity of this. I thought it was a lot of fun in 2022, we played the Elma combo for our album release show for Reload. And that, to me, that show really stands out because it was almost cathartic, because we actually recorded Reload in January February of 2020. So like we went in the studio with the intention of releasing music throughout later 2020 into 2021. We finished the record and Blow came out exactly when it was supposed to, which ended up being a week after the world shut down. And I cannot tell you how many times I sat down and reworked the release plan for the future singles and for the album, and how many, like we had so many wheels turning. We did this huge pre-order campaign and we got it sponsored by some of our favorite independent Ontario businesses like Hades Coffee, Sock Bro, Chica's Chicken, Muskoka Brewery. And I told them it was all going to be out like this year sort of thing. So like for almost like a year and a half, it was constantly figuring out how are we going to do this all. And, 2022 rolls around and we released the record in April. And then a month later, we played like the release show at the El Macombo. And it was like our first show in months. It was our first Toronto show in even more months. And it was just like this moment of everything that we've been working for, everything that I've been putting together behind the scenes. It came together 2 years later, but it came together and the show happened at the venue that we didn't expect it to happen at. But when they opened the El Macombo, I told myself like, we're going to play this venue for something, meaningful to us and something cool. And we got the El Macombo for the celebration of our record release. And it was just such a fun show to play that venue and to celebrate the music and to see it all, come to fruition after like 2 years almost of just sitting on it was such an incredible feeling.
That's awesome, brother. Cathartic is the word for sure. Like that's so many bands that, had music coming during that era of, that C word I don't like to say on the show. To see everything come to fruition and to see the success that you guys had with that record, the killer record, by the way, which if you're interested in hearing more about that record, you can always go back on the show, folks, because I did have Chris on to talk about the record and we really broke it down and got to hear all the songs and everything. So that was, I'll have to go back and check. I'll maybe throw the link down below in the description of this if you guys are interested in hearing the record in full and learning a little bit about the behind the scenes thing for the record. Because it's a killer record. Reload's always a great title for a record, man. Always love it. I love it. All right, Gerrod, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for the time, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I had a great time here.
All right, folks, there you have it. My chat with Gerrod Harris. What a wonderful way to start off 2024 with just a stellar interview. Always enjoy when I get to talk with a fellow content creator who also happens to be a writer, interviewer, also a badass musician. So definitely a wide-ranging bit of topics in that conversation. But, podcasting is very near and dear to my heart, and I was so excited for him to get his podcast started. So I really wanted to talk about that at length and really dive into kind of what makes him tick as a podcaster and an interviewer. And I think we did that. So thank you so very much, Gerrod, for coming on the show. I very much appreciate it. Keep your eye out for One in a Chamber this year, guys. There's going to be some great stuff coming out of that camp. Check out Beats by Jerry. You'll find a link down below in the description of this podcast. And of course, all his work with The Spill magazine. Before we sign off here today, I of course want to take a second to give a shout out to all of my Patreon supporters, my hotheads. I couldn't give a proper hotheads the last couple of weeks, so I needed to do a good one. First and foremost, we have the Baseline Feed crew, Ronan Komori, aka Mo, and of course Mr. Tanner Wood, also known as Wolf Delta Pi. We have actor extraordinaire Eric Phones. We have C.M. Peters. Jason Reese from Jaybird Digital Arts, my man, my brother. Kelly Sisson. Terry and Janet Hodder, the impromptu creators of The Hodder Show. Brandon Bowden of Bowden Voice. Neil Scrupa of Neurotic Voice, not Necrotic Voice, Neurotic Voice. I got it right this time, buddy, I promise. I go back and forth, but Neurotic Voice today. Mr. Ian Hall, of course, last but not least. Thank you so very much to everybody for all their support in 2023 on the Patreon. And then, of course, 2024. With that, we are ready to sign off here today. Thank you guys so very much for all of the support. Shout out to all the hotheads once again. And I will catch you next time right here on The Hotter Show. Take it easy, guys.